Let's give the EXO guys another round of applause, because that was pretty much amazing. Us jerks up here have nothing to do with making people walk. But I'm really glad that I get to sit with you, Eben. This is Eben Upton, Raspberry Pi founder, creator, the father of 1,000,000 tiny little computers. So this is an entire computer, and I want you, Eben, to tell the uninitiated, and everybody should know about this, but I want you to tell everybody about the Raspberry Pi.
So when I was a kid, I had a computer. I had a computer in my bedroom from the age of 10. And the really neat thing about this was a computer I bought not to learn to program on. I bought this computer to play games on. And the neat thing about that computer was that every time you turned it on, there was a little blinking cursor on the screen that kind of just tempted you, just beckoned you into the world of programming. If you wanted to do something other than program that computer, then you had to decide to do something else. The default choice with that machine was to learn to program. And I think millions of people in the developed world in the 1980s grew up with machines just like that, and many of us grew up to be professional software engineers, professional hardware engineers. And so a group of us at the university in Cambridge found ourselves sitting around in the middle part of the last decade. And all of a sudden, we realized that children, since maybe the mid-1990s, certainly children by 2005, didn't have anything like that access to easily programmable hardware that they could use to get their start in programming that would lure them into a world of software engineering. And really, Raspberry Pi was our response to that. This was starting to cause trouble for us at the university in Cambridge. We were starting to struggle to find enough people to come and study computer science. And Raspberry Pi really is our response to that. It's our attempt to build the computer, build this missing computer, this notion that there was a niche that wasn't being filled. And Raspberry Pi was, I guess it's been an 8-year journey for us now.
So you literally had a void of, I guess, prompt-ready computer scientists? That sounds really...
Yeah,
it's kind of sad.
I mean, it's remarkable. In a country like the UK, which obviously has an amazing history of doing awesome stuff with computers, had a very, very vibrant home computer scene in the 1980s. We'd gone over the course of maybe 10 years from this wonderful environment to a kind of an environment of desolation. Our numbers had halved. The number of people applying to study computer science at Cambridge had halved. The sorts of things that those students knew how to do when they arrived at the university had declined from 2 or 3 different sorts of assembly language, to in many cases maybe having done a little bit of Visual Basic, a little bit of maybe designed a web page. Starting to cause a lot of trouble for the university, and starting to cause a lot of trouble also for industry.
What do you think it is about the computer industry, I guess in the past few years, that has done that to, I guess, folks who are interested in computers want to go to CS anyway, and they should understand it's fairly hard, but what would make them think that, oh, I did HTML, so I might as well program a Cray?
So I think we've always, computer science and engineering subjects in general struggle to some degree to find high school students who are interested in coming to study at university. If you're good at physics, at high school, it doesn't take an enormous leap of imagination to think, I'm going to go do some more of this thing that I'm good at. Now, because in most countries we don't teach anything which would be recognizable as computer science or engineering at high school, it requires a much bigger leap of imagination for somebody to decide they're going to go and be an academic computer scientist, that they're going to go and commit 3 years of their life to studying computer science. And those machines we used to have provided that easy way in. They provided that ladder. They provided people with an early experience of this thing they were going to go on to do at university.
So you guys were just hanging out in Cambridge. What does it take for your team to build something? I mean, this is a full-bore computer. You have a HDMI out, you have Ethernet in. What did it take for you guys to shrink everything down and get it made in the UK, which is another thing that you're...
Well, we started doing this in 2005, and we started off with something which was really, we were building prototypes of the Raspberry Pi. There's a 2006 era Raspberry Pi, which is this size. It's built, it can be hand soldered on a piece of
So it's as big as a pie.
It's as big as a pie, as big as a good-sized, tasty, fattening pie. And this is you could build this in an afternoon on a piece of Aero board with components you could go down to Radio Shack and buy. But the interesting thing about that is that although it's cheap, and it's technically a computer, and it's probably about as good as the computer from the 1980s in terms of performance, children today didn't find it interesting. When we put it in front of children who were used to PlayStation games and being able to watch video and being able to go on surf the web, obviously, these days Facebook, then those days something else, a device that couldn't do those things, a device that only offered a 1980s level of performance, wasn't really interesting to grab their attention. And before you can trick them into programming, you have to grab their attention. So really, I guess, we had a 5-year period of trying to hold that price point. We picked a $25 price point because that was what we thought we could ask children to pay. That's kind of our idea of what a high school textbook costs. Maybe a slightly optimistic view of what a high school textbook costs. But this was the amount of money we thought we could ask children to pay. And so it really had a 5-year period of trying to shrink it down and pack more and more and more features in, to the point where by 2010 we were holding something which was maybe a tenth the size and was a full-bore Linux computer.
Okay. And I guess what happens when you bring these into schools? What has the reaction been?
I think we'd assumed that to get kids interested in this device, we were going to have to put it in a shiny box. We assumed we were going to have to give it the full kind of Apple treatment. What's really interesting is if you put that in front of a lot of kids, not even particularly kind of geeky technical kids, you put that in front of kids and you say that's a computer, and then you boot it up and you show them what it can do. Something just switches on behind the eyes. You know, this is, for a lot of children now, technology is just magic. It might as well be a wizard in it. You know, this is a piece of functional magic for them. You don't normally see the green stuff unless if you drop your mobile phone on the floor, maybe you see the green stuff. So this idea that they have a device which is so simple that they can look at it, they can name the bit of it that does the network, they can name the memory, they can name all of the connectors on it, they can see it's that simple. It just sort of seems to engage them. We found we'll take these into classes of, like I say, not particularly technical children, and there will always be 1 or 2 children at the end who basically have to be crowbarred off the thing, who have to be dragged physically away from the device, you know, who want to just postpone whatever the next lesson is and get some more time hacking on the device.
So it's almost like a child's drawing of a computer.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's that simple. And one of the things is, you know, if you give a child a very sophisticated and powerful computer and they accomplish something with it, there's almost something psychological where the child feels that the device has helped them in some way. They don't necessarily, if they write a little game on there, they don't somehow psychologically attribute all of the achievement to themselves. They attribute some of it to the machine. This is very obviously a very primitive piece of hardware, and the child will think, well, you know, that can't possibly have helped me, and all of the credit belongs to me, which is where it should belong.
So we've done the origin story. So you have right now you're building all of this stuff in the UK, and I guess you're hitting some milestones in terms of shipping and manufacturing?
Yeah, so we're closing in on our 2 millionth Raspberry Pi. The great thing for me, I'm Welsh. I was born in Wales. Wales used to be, you know, 150 years ago, Wales was the Silicon Valley of its time. You know, the Bessemer steel process, which is what made Carnegie all of his money, was invented about 5 miles from where I was born. The first £1 million check was written in Cardiff. You know, this place was amazing. This place was the Bay Area 150 years ago. It's had a hard time in the last 50 years. It's like a lot of industrial areas of the developed world, it's had a hard time. And so, although we started building the Pi in the Far East, we did the natural thing. We want to build cheap hardware. Where do you build it? You build it in Shenzhen. About almost exactly a year ago, we discovered that we were able to bring back manufacture of this to the UK. It's actually built for us now by Sony in South Wales, about 10 miles from where I was born. And we're building it in South Wales more cheaply now than we had been able to build it in China. And that was a real revelation for us.
So you're able to build this little board, and what were the costs involved in building it in China versus the costs involved in Wales? Was it shipping? Was there some sort of component issue? Or what was
So there's obviously there's a shipping advantage. So I think on day one, when we first moved manufacture, it was maybe 25 cents more expensive to build it in the UK than it was in China, but we were saving 25 cents on the shipping. And it's cheaper in China because you're closer to the component manufacturers. It's cheaper in China because the labor costs are lower. So on day one, that slight increase in cost and the reduction in shipping costs kind of traded off. Now, the really neat thing for us is over time, being in the same country as our factory, speaking the same language as the people who run our factory, we've been able to go over there, and you get into that optimization loop. You can have your monthly meeting where you say, you know, what is the most painful thing for you about building our product? You know, what do you hate about building Raspberry Pis? You know, what could we change about our product to make it cheaper and easier for you to make it? And then you make those changes, and then you share the benefits. And so we're now solidly ahead. We are now significantly cheaper building in Wales than we were in China.
So in terms of iteration, how often have you iterated the Pi, and what's the next, I guess, Pi going to look like?
We've iterated the Pi, I guess we've iterated the Pi twice since launch. We iterated to produce what we call a Rev 2, the Rev 2 board, which fixes a number of issues. Our first, our Rev 1 board, which we shipped about 300,000 of, was really the prototype board with one little manual fix on the PCB design. So Rev 2 came out after about 6 months and fixed that. The other thing we were able to do is we were very lucky. We came along and started shipping Pi just as RAM prices declined. Yep. So we were able to double the RAM on the Pi. So from almost exactly this time last year, we were able to ship half gigabyte Pis instead of quarter gigabyte Pis. I think we've said we're going to do a minor board revision to improve particularly power consumption of the device. We think we can squeeze a little more power consumption out, which is going to be great for people who are using it in a battery-operated environment. So we're going to do that, and I think that'll roll in sometime next year. We don't have any plans at the moment for radically new hardware designs. Most of our engineering effort is going on software. We think we can get a lot more performance out of this platform simply by improving the software loadout on the device.
So your whole model as an educator was to create something that kids could use. At this point now, there's like a little mini industry built around the Pi, right?
So I guess it was a real surprise for us that we make the Pi. Well, we don't even make the Pi. We design the Pi and we license the design of the Pi to our partners. We've always been very reluctant to build cases for the Pi. One of the reasons we didn't ever build a case for the Pi, we simply didn't think we were going to sell enough Raspberry Pis to pay to amortize the cost of an injection mold. An injection mold costs $10,000.
Sure.
We thought we were going to sell 1,000 Raspberry Pis. That's $10 a Raspberry Pi. So there was no case. We historically, at least, didn't have the engineering resource to build add-on boards. And one of the nice things about that is it means we've left a lot of value out in the ecosystem. We've left a lot of value out there simply in putting a Pi in a box. We've had two companies in the UK, a company called Pimoroni, and a company called Mod My Pi, both of whom have done about $1 million of turnover in their first year of trading. They've had no investment, $1 million of turnover from a standing start, making cases and making accessories for the Pi. That's just, the presence of that ecosystem just makes it a more interesting platform, and it makes it a more interesting platform without sapping the engineering resources of our organization, because we don't have that many engineers even today.
And what's next for the Pi in terms of geographic spread? I guess it's really popular in the States. I have one running on my desk. It's mining Bitcoin right now. It's all over Europe. Where is it headed next?
We're very keen to see Raspberry Pi in South America. There are some big challenges associated with getting into that, particularly into Brazil. Brazil's an enormous potential environment, very technically literate, very rapidly growing environment for the Pi. One of the issues we have at the moment is around tariffs. So we're looking at a variety of things, local manufacture, potentially, although we've currently concentrated all of our manufacturing in the UK, we may find that it's necessary to actually go and build devices in Brazil in order to I think a Raspberry Pi costs maybe $80 in Brazil, costs $35 in the United States, costs $80 in Brazil.
Okay.
And that's almost entirely a tariff issue. Love to get it into Brazil, love to do more in India, love to do more ourselves in Africa. And we're starting to see third parties do interesting things in Africa. We're starting to see people, we have this idea of suitcase pies. People who work for NGOs will come to the UK and they will buy 25 Raspberry Pis and take them back to Africa in a suitcase. And so these suitcase pies, they're starting to show up in computer laboratories. They're starting to show up stuck to the side of walls as Wi-Fi access points.
Oh, wow.
They're starting to show up in weather stations and wildlife monitoring platforms all over Africa. And that's happening without our involvement. So it'd be really good to see if we can, over the next year, see if we can find a way to support some of that in just a slightly more formal way. We don't want to go and squash this ecosystem that's developing in Africa, but it would just be nice to know if there are any things that we could do to make it slightly easier.
So they're importing them for you,
yeah.
And they're ending up in strange places.
Yeah.
What's the strangest place you've seen a Pi in, I guess, Africa now?
I guess
most interesting.
Yeah, so my favorite African one, the Zoological Society of London, they have a wildlife monitoring platform that they can deploy in national parks in Africa. And this consists of a lot of low power infrared cameras they can use to photograph wildlife in the dark. But these devices also have microphones on them, so you can do gunshot triangulation.
Okay.
So if in the middle of the night 3 of these nodes hear a gunshot, they can have a very accurate time base. They can triangulate the position of the gunshot and dispatch dispatch a ranger to go and find out
And
what's
the Pi
happening.
just notifies the world.
Yeah, and so the Pi then sits in the middle. These little devices are out there. They have a very low power consumption requirement, so they don't use Pi as the individual nodes. They use Pis as the uplink box. So you'll have a mesh of these devices out in the wild, and then for every 10 of these devices, you'll have a Pi with an Iridium satellite modem that will then uplink that data, uplink interesting images, and uplink alarm notifications if it's heard gunshots. So that was kind of fun.
So it seems like a lot of, I mean, it's not even, it's hobbyists now are kind of really Pi enthusiasts. Are you kind of, how are you going to push this back into the STEM world, into the education world?
And to a great degree, we see the hobbyists as being vital for the STEM work, because often the hobbyists are the people who go and prototype a platform. I mean, there's a big high-altitude ballooning community around the Pi, people stringing these things up under weather balloons and sending them up. And what we've seen over the last year is that migrate from being a thing that's done by 40-year-olds to being a thing that's done by high school kids. And we kind of hope that at some point this is something that can be done by primary school kids. Really, it's a sort of a $200 project, and it's something that can be packaged up into a form where even any primary school can go and deploy its own high-altitude balloon space program almost. So a lot of those things that happen, probably the 60% of our market, which is adult hobbyists, the 60% of our market, which is the maker community, they're doing the pioneering work. They're laying the groundwork for what we think in 2 or 3 years' time is going to be our mainstream STEM work.
So they show the kids what's cool, and then then grade schools can.
The number of people who've done high altitude ballooning because little local interest. We beat Felix Baumgartner's jump by about 30 meters. We sent a teddy bear up and dropped him from 30 meters higher than Felix. And the number of kids who see that sort of thing and then start to ask, is that something I can do? And the answer is, yeah, absolutely. And maybe we can put a lot of documentation on the web for you. Maybe we can even offer you a kit to let you do it without having to go out and scavenge up all of the parts. Yeah.
So what's another favorite project that you've seen?
I always just go on about the space ones because I'm a child of the 80s, so I'm a real space cadet. Absolutely amazing astrophotography work. A lot of really, really nice. People sticking these things. I said we don't do accessory boards. We do a camera board. We do this little $25 5-megapixel camera. A lot of people sticking those on telescopes. At the start of the week, we launched an infrared sensitive camera board, and we're starting to see, we've seeded a few of those out into the wild over the last couple of months. We're starting to see people doing really nice night vision stuff, starting to see people doing plant health monitoring. It turns out that infrared is great for agriculture applications, and that may be a thing that has developing world applications.
And are you a actual fan of Pi? Do you enjoy the actual pastry? Is that a thing?
I do
I
enjoy
can only imagine you probably just hate it now.
Yeah, no, I do enjoy Pi. Raspberry Pi has its own set of challenges. Making a good Raspberry Pi has its own set of challenges. Raspberry is not the best.
Yeah, it's squishy.
It sort of squishes away to nothing. So Raspberry Pi, but Pi in general is good. Apple pie, meringue. Yeah, nice meringue pie.
So there you go. So send Eben all your Pi.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be a lot of Pi. Yeah. Thank you very much, Eben.
Awesome.
This is amazing. Give this guy a round of applause. He is single-handedly putting the command prompt right in front of millions of kids right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.